From deep within the undrained Republican-filled swamps of Florida, this is the Krasson Cast, defending what's left, with hosts Brian and Ed Krassenstein.
Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Krasson Cast. I'm excited to get started again. Brian, I want to address something really fast. After the first 2 episodes of our podcast, I noticed a lot of criticism on Twitter and other social media outlets about how our voices are really high-pitched. Did you notice that? I didn't, but your voice sounds really high-pitched to me right now. Wait a minute, yours does too. Uh-oh.
Is that any better?
Yeah, that's a lot better. How about me?
Yeah, you sound better too.
Okay, cool. So let's get on with the show. Again, we are available on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and virtually every other podcast provider. But if you really want to help support us and you want to get access to these podcasts 2 days in advance, you can back us on Patreon. Our Patreon is accessible at krassencast.com. And for $5, you get early access and you get all kinds of additional content, and you can communicate with us if you really care about doing that.
It really helps the show, and it allows us to expand the show, hire a staff, hire a producer, which we're trying to do, and really get some awesome guests on the show. Not that our guests haven't been awesome. They have been incredibly awesome.
Maybe we can also get some voice box implants, so that we can deepen our voice, and we can talk like this.
I think we could probably just do that right on the soundboard.
All right, well, maybe we can look into that then.
But you can still back us. The money would go to good use. We're not trying to become millionaires from this. We're just trying to make this show the best it can be.
So let's get on with the show. Today we have a special guest. I like to consider her to be a superhero. Her name is Gretchen Gordon, and she's a nurse in San Diego. And she's making frequent trips down to Tijuana, Mexico, where she's helping the injured, the sick, and anybody who needs a nurse.
The asylum seekers.
Yes, they are asylum seekers who are seeking asylum in the United States. Most of them are women and children. There's some men, there's some teenagers, but she has a really good story to tell.
Yeah, I saw some of the stuff around that this woman was saying, and I just know that this interview is going to probably really piss me off, because some of the things that I saw coming from her showed just how much lack of empathy the United States government has for these people.
Yeah, and I might actually shed a tear, because it's really heart-wrenching, some of this stuff. And I know we're going to get attacked by some people who are going to call us soy boys and beta males because I just said I might shed a tear, but that's just because we care.
So let's just jump right into this interview. We have Gretchen Gordon with us right now. Gretchen, welcome to the show.
So 3 weeks ago, you said you went down to Tijuana to provide medical care for refugees who are awaiting their turn to apply for asylum. Can you go into a little more detail about what happened when you were down there?
Well, I was one person of several that walked across the border from San Diego to Tijuana, went to a shelter, one of the shelters there that have been set up to provide legal assistance and some medical care for the people that have come to Tijuana waiting for their turn to seek asylum. I met a woman there that somehow had found her way to the shelter after traveling from Honduras, Tijuana. She had been kidnapped in Mexico. She had been held in a house and had men put a gun to her head and tell her that they were going to kill her. She managed to escape.
Does she know why she was kidnapped or who these men were?
No, she was in a state of a lot of trauma. She was trembling and very tearful. So I just really wanted to provide support and not, probe too much. Just, really grateful that she was there and that she was safe. So she had somehow managed to escape from that home and found someone helped her find her way to the shelter. She was also sick. So I provided some basic medical care, and because my Spanish I'm not conversational, we just held each other, and I just held on to her and she held on to me until we could find a more permanent shelter for her. Wow. So I left Tijuana that day and just, thinking about her so much. And I knew that she had said that she was really afraid that the men would try to find her and hurt her again. So just, hoping and, putting out whatever safety energy I could to make sure that, thinking of her and thinking of her being safe. So I went down to Tijuana this past Saturday again with a medical group, and we went to 3 different shelters. And the second shelter I went to that was especially for women and children, I turned around and she was there. And I was so happy to see her and so grateful that she was alive and that she was safe. And we were just, had this connection. And I'm just, like I said, just so happy that she was here. She was able to tell her story enough so that she was given a number. So she's in the process of waiting to apply for asylum, to do her credible fear interview. And so she's now in a place of safety and has a number waiting to tell her story.
Does she know how long it's going to be before she hears back from the U.S. regarding her asylum?
Right now, I'm sure you're aware that this administration has put up many roadblocks for people to apply for asylum. They're metering people so that people are in Tijuana for long periods of time. So, when they talk about a crisis at the border, this is really what the crisis is that people are held in Tijuana for really long periods of time. When we really should be listening to their claims of asylum and helping them get to the sponsors while they wait to have their hearings. And that's not happening. They're just they're kept in Tijuana for really long periods of time with really marginal access to food and shelter and medical care, and people are really trying hard to provide all those things. But there's a lot of people. There's thousands of people waiting. So that's really what the crisis is when they speak of crisis at the border. It really is a humanitarian crisis.
So we hear Trump say humanitarian crisis over and over again. And what you're saying is there is a humanitarian crisis down there, but it's just not what Trump is implying it to be, though.
Correct. I mean, it's created by the administration. The crisis is manufactured by the idea that they're going to limit the people that are allowed to apply for asylum. So that's really kind of what's going on there. It's not a crisis of people storming the border. It's a crisis of people waiting so much longer than they need to when they're, they've come such a long distance, refugees, asking for safety for themselves and for their children.
Can you describe what it's like in these camps in Mexico, in Tijuana? Are these people taken care of? Are they optimistic?
Are they overcrowded? Are there multiple shelters or?
There are multiple shelters with different groups of people. They have a shelter, especially for the most vulnerable, which are the women and their children that are alone. They have shelters just for children that have come alone, primarily teenagers that have traveled from Central America by themselves. So they have a special shelter just because they have their own safety needs, because they're minors. And then there's a more general shelter where there's more families. So they are overcrowded. They still need a lot of supplies, clean water, clean clothes. People are volunteering. There's a large network of grassroots organizations that are helping down there. And, and the people of Tijuana have been helping. And, it's just a lot of services that they need that people are trying to provide for them.
What's the makeup of these shelters? Are they mostly women and children, women and teenagers, or are there a lot of men that are there by themselves, like kind of the administration has tried to portray?
My experience is primarily women and their children. There are some teenagers traveling alone. There are also some people that are vulnerable because they are lesbian or gay or transsexual. They don't feel they've been persecuted and there's violence perpetrated against them in Central America. So there's a shelter especially for them as well. So it's primarily really the most vulnerable in their society, and that's primarily women and their children. The woman that I met, her husband had been killed either by a gang or cartel. I couldn't tell exactly in Honduras, and so she left because she was alone and she was afraid.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So her husband was killed in Honduras, and then she was kidnapped when she was making the trek through Mexico. Is
That's
that correct?
correct. Yes. So, the women are traveling with their children alone because their fathers or their husbands or their brothers have been kidnapped or hurt and threatened, and so they are desperate to, save their lives, save the lives of their children. There are also men there that also have been threatened and are afraid. So, there are men present, but it's really not men coming, over here to try to, take someone's job. They're really here to try to seek refuge from violence, and so I just, really, hope people understand that it's not something that anyone needs to be afraid of. It's something that people, as Americans, that we need to embrace because this is our community of, it's our humanity.
What does this woman? I believe you said her name was Yaritza.
Yes.
What 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 does she plan on doing once she gets to the United States? Does she have family here?
She does. She has a sponsor. She has a daughter in Pennsylvania. So she's hoping, if they will listen to her credible fear interview and allow her to get a hearing in the United States, she's going to be going to Pennsylvania to stay with her daughter.
At what rate do you see these people in these shelters, since you're there, actually getting their credible fear interview? Is it something where you see multiple people leaving each day to do this, or is it a much slower process?
Well, I've also volunteered at the shelter here in San Diego. So what ICE has been doing here is pushing between 50 and 80 people per day. That this is before the government shut down, but between 50 and 80 people per day onto the streets of San Diego. The idea was to try to create this false narrative of people, of immigrants sort of flooding the streets of our cities. So they would just drop them off at the Greyhound bus stop or down at the McDonald's at the border with no place to go, no
Wow.
money. Some grassroots organizations here in San Diego, including San Diego Rapid Response, started to mobilize and pick up everyone that was on the streets and started a shelter here in San Diego. So that started in October of this year, and now it's much more sort of formalized by the San Diego County and the city of San Diego as well, getting involved and providing some funds and for the people that have already passed through their credible fear interviews. So it's between, before the government shut down, between 50 and 80 people per day.
So they're actually the people they are allowing in, they're just dumping onto the streets to make it appear bad. Is that what you're kind of suggesting?
Exactly. That was the intent.
I think I heard something about that going on in El Paso, Texas too. I believe Beto
Correct.
O'Rourke
Yes.
made
I
a few
think that
posts.
was, yes.
So this is like a federal initiative. They're actually just dropping asylum seekers who are granted asylum off at bus stops in order to create a false narrative.
Right. So they already
Wow.
have their ankle monitors on, and they've gone through the whole process. They're waiting for their hearings in the United States. And they've just changed. I don't know if it's just, I don't think it was out like in the news as far as changing policy, but it's just, this is what they've been decided to do. So, like I said, San Diego, I know, has just created this kind of grassroots movement that's, now has a lot more support. The ACLU has stepped in and Jewish Family Services as well as the city and county. I did hear a couple stories of, women in detention that while they were in detention, they're not allowed. A woman was not allowed to nurse her child. She was told that she can only nurse her baby in private, and they're in a large cage with many other people. So she
So
had
where was
to.
that located? Was that in San
That's in
Diego
San
or
Diego,
in?
while she was in the
Well,
detention. So she had to hide nursing her child. Another woman stopped lactating, stopped producing breast milk because probably stress and dehydration. She had a 10-month-old son, and he doesn't have teeth yet. And the only thing that she was given to feed him was a burrito. So she
well,
had to
that's
chew up the burrito herself and then put it into his mouth. So it
That's
just, there's
insane
a
that
lot
they
of really difficult things that people have to go through even while they're in detention. I did report both of those instances to the ACLU. So, there's some record of some of the things that are happening in detention as well.
Wow, that's unbelievable that the U.S. government's actually doing this. Not only are they separating children from their parents, but they're preventing mothers from breastfeeding their children.
It's not physically, but it's the shame. So there's, like I said, they're told you can only breastfeed in private, and yet there is no privacy afforded them. So,
What's the
they're
part? I mean, that's not a U.S. law that you can only breastfeed in private. I
right,
mean, what's the?
exactly. It's about shaming them and just making it as difficult as possible.
Wow.
there's the administration has been pushing this line that there's crime and drugs and human trafficking coming in with these asylum seekers. Have you noticed any of that in these shelters in Tijuana?
I have not. The people that I have seen are people that are here to seek asylum because they are fleeing, extreme poverty, extreme violence in Central America. I don't know, of course, I don't know every single person there, but that's my experience. Really, people that are here just, wanting safety and wanting to live and wanting their children to survive.
Overall, what do you think these asylum seekers' thoughts are when it comes to the political situation in America and, say, on Trump's wall and his rhetoric about the drugs and the crime and the human trafficking coming into this country?
I don't think that they know a lot about sort of the politics of the United States. They're coming because they're in a place of, fleeing. So they are just trying to get to safety. And I don't think they know all the nuance of what's happening in the United States. There are many immigration attorneys that are volunteering their time there, that are trying to explain the process and why, sort of why people are staying in Tijuana so long. But I don't know if they know all sort of what's happening with the demonizing of immigrants in the United States right now, and how that the rhetoric has changed.
Is there any reason why some of these people don't just stay in Mexico? Why they keep going on to the United States? Are they?
Well, I think that she kind of mentioned that because this woman was kidnapped in Mexico.
Yeah. So is that mainly the people feel unsafe in Mexico as well? Is that kind of what
Well,
you?
many of these people also have sponsors, someone that they know in the United States, where they can go and wait to hear their credible fear story. And I think they feel like the United States is a place of safety where there might be some opportunity for them and for their child. Mexico is a wonderful country, also has a lot of issues for themselves, where they have a lot of poverty and people that are struggling to survive as well. So I think it's really kind of the story of the United States as a place of safety and a place of opportunity.
Wow, that's really an incredible story with Yaritza. Do you plan on going back and visiting with her again?
I'm going to go back. I mean, I'm not sure where she will be. If she's where she is in the line. She does have her number. Now I know where she is. I'm going to go back anyway to volunteer just as a medical in the medical team. But yes, I want to try to find her again and see her again.
You said that she has family in the U.S. Have you been in contact with them, and what have they said?
No, I haven't. I know she said she had a daughter in Pennsylvania, but I didn't. I haven't tried to reach out to her. But I think,
You
yeah,
said
that's
that
that. Thank you for thinking of that. I think that's an important part. I should do that. Let her know that her mom is safe.
the communication's difficult because she speaks Spanish and your Spanish isn't very fluent. Are there translators down there, or
Yes, there
I
are
assume?
translators to help. Yes, there are.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right. Well, thanks for your incredible story, and it was really heartfelt.
Is there anything else you want to add, or?
Well, just thanks for listening, and thank you for people think that that's an important part of what's happening in our nation right now. That we embrace refugees. That's who we are as Americans, and it just again, it's our common humanity, and we just need to feel that within ourselves and each other, And so just hoping that whatever anyone hears from this story, that touches them in that way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, America has always been a refuge for these asylum seekers. It shouldn't be any different now. Do you have, is there any way that people listening can help out? Do you have any suggestions?
I actually, there are organizations here that are helping. Casa Cornelia is here. Jewish Family Services here in San Diego is doing the shelter in the United States. The ACLU here is helping as well. So, any organizations that are working with immigration, I know Races in Texas is doing a lot of great work there. So, any immigration rights organizations are doing a lot of work right now and depending on volunteers and people donating time and money. So that would be always very helpful.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. And we'll look and try and put out some of these links to some of these
Okay, so appreciative
organizations.
of that. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us,
Okay,
Gretchen.
all right. Have a nice day. Bye bye.
Wow. I told you, Eddie, that this was really going to piss me off. And I think you now know why.
Yeah, I'm genuinely aggravated about the situation and what the U.S. government's actually doing. I'm sure it's probably at Trump's request, but it's just so frustrating.
It all goes back to the president. He's been shooting off this rhetoric for his entire presidency, and he's doing everything he possibly can to discourage people from seeking asylum in this country, and it just pisses me off.
I just don't understand how all of the Christians and those people who are pro life can actually support a president who's doing this to families and children and breastfeeding mothers. It's just insane to me that these people who claim to be Christian can also support this president.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's almost as if this whole movement to alienate these asylum seekers as well as immigrants just seeking a better opportunity in this country is a bigoted and racist strategy. And I'm willing to say that those chants of build that wall, it's not much different than other racial epithets that we've heard in the past. People use that to hide behind their racism, and you hear these chants, build that wall, build that wall. It's basically saying I'm a racist, I'm a bigot for the most part. I mean, some people may genuinely think that the wall is needed, but I almost feel like that build the wall chant has become a way to show their dominance over another race or ethnic group.
Well, and the wall was originally going to be a 2,000-mile long concrete barrier with, steel rebarb in it. And it has
That Mexico was going to
that
pay for.
Mexico is going to pay for, and it has transformed into this. It's still Trump's still calling it a wall, even though he's now saying, "Oh, steel slats" or whatnot.
Yeah. So this wall, I mean, there's already fencing in place, right? So Trump's now saying that he's already building the wall because they're rebuilding some of these fences.
So why don't we go over the history of the fencing at the border? Because I think that's important, and I think Trump acts like this is his idea. He wants his base to believe that when he builds fencing or when he renovates fencing, it's all on him and it's actually his wall.
Yeah, the idea of fencing has been around for a while, and we've built several hundreds of miles of fencing. The only thing Trump seems to have brought to the table is link this idea of fencing, this hatred and bigotry.
A nationalistic idea, I think. So, just to get started, the U.S. Border Patrol actually first began erecting physical barriers or fencing or portions of a wall, whatever you want to call it, along the border in San Diego in 1990. Since that time, DHS has continued to build and renovate the fencing. It's happened under Bush, it's happened under Clinton, it's happened under Obama, and it's still happening under Trump, even though Trump wants to take credit for it.
Yeah, so every president going back several presidents, at least to Bush, right?
Almost 30 years.
They've all had some idea of at least putting fencing up in certain strategic areas.
Yes, and it works in certain areas. It helps curtail people crossing the border illegally. But then we get to 2006 under George W. Bush. Congress actually created the Secure Fence Act, also known as H.R. 6061, and that authorized partially funding 700 miles of fencing, not 2,000 like Trump wants, but it authorizes 700 miles.
Of fencing, not 30-foot walls of concrete like he originally planned.
Exactly. This is vehicular barriers, fencing for people walking. It wasn't just it wasn't a wall, and it also included checkpoints, security lighting, cameras, drones, and satellite funding for all that. And then in 2007, however, there was an amendment passed because they started realizing that we don't really need all this fencing. We don't need everything that Congress originally approved. It was trial and error. They're like, okay, this works, this doesn't work. So the following year, the amendment was passed, and it actually allowed the DHS secretary to decide against fencing in certain locations where he or she believed that it was not necessary.
Yeah, as technology advanced, I'm sure there are other options, right?
Yeah, well, DHS decided that fencing wasn't appropriate in many of these locations that were originally planned because it just wasn't feasible, and instead they opted for something called virtual fencing, which is basically like what you said, Brian, technology.
And keep in mind that this was over 10 years ago, right? So think about how much technology has advanced since.
Yeah, so virtual fencing that included sensors, cameras, and basically any other technology you can come up with to prevent illegal crossings, maybe drones, anything technology wise. So then between 2010 and 2015, under President Obama, the current fencing had actually been breached. How many times do you think it's been breached in those 5 years?
Uh, by certain individuals,
Yeah, breach like you break through it or go under it or whatnot.
hundreds of times, I'd say.
9,287 times. And the cost to repair where the fence was breached during this span of 5 years, $7.2 million. So there's studies, does the fencing work? Does it not work? Is it just a bigoted tool, political tool by the president? There's actually a paper written by the University of Pennsylvania, and it showed that the Secure Fence Act actually either indirectly or directly caused at least 2,000 human lives to be lost.
Well, how is that?
It wasn't American lives like you might think, but still lives count, right? Whether it's American lives or Mexican lives or Honduran lives. So,
A Mexican life is worth just as much as an American life.
yes, I agree. So, but I mean, it was drug cartel lives.
Okay, well, maybe a drug cartel member's life isn't worth as much as
Well,
American life.
well, the drug cartels were getting in fights among each other because the territory changed, and it wasn't just members of the drug cartel being killed; it was innocent Mexicans as well who were caught among these fights. So, is it really necessary? Does the wall actually work? There's a lot of debate.
I think there's plenty of reasons why a wall is a bad idea, though, don't you?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of them.
First of all, I think it's important to understand that 40% of undocumented immigrants actually came here legally via the visa program, and they overstayed their visas. And this 40% actually exceeds the number of undocumented immigrants crossing the southern border with Mexico. It's 40%, but there's less than 40% of them are crossing the border. So the visa issue is a bigger problem than the border crossing issue.
Yeah, and I mean, the visa issue pertains to the whole world. People come here from all over the world. They get here, they might start families here. Who knows? They might get a job here, and then they don't want to go back because they get acclimated to life in America.
Well, here's another argument against a wall, and that is that over the last 20 years, the number of I'm not going to say Mexicans, but the number of undocumented immigrants crossing the southern border has gone down each of the last 20 years. And we're now at basically a 20-year low of people crossing the southern border. So this is a problem that's gotten substantially better.
So, what you're saying is that Trump's national emergency isn't really a national emergency.
Yeah, I mean, and he wants you to spend more money. Right now he wants 5.7 billion for the wall, but in actuality the wall is probably going to cost closer to 20 billion dollars. And keep in mind that 19.5 billion dollars is already being spent on border security. And this is at a time when the border is actually more secure and safer than it's been in the last 20 years. So none of this really makes sense.
Well, I mean, Trump doesn't want you to know that because Trump doesn't really care about building a wall for American protection. What he cares about is building a wall to appease his base because it was something he promised them, something that got him votes.
His base just don't understand some of the reasons why this is such a bad idea. First of all, you've got 2/3 of the land that Trump originally wanted to build a wall on is either land owned by private parties or by individual states. The other one third is owned by the federal government or Native Americans. So mostly all the land they're going to have to seize from people. And most of this land that they'd have to confiscate are from ranchers and homeowners and taxpayers. And a lot of this land has actually been in these families, these ranching families, before that land was even a part of the United States.
It's so crazy. It really is.
Now, here's another thing we have to consider, and that's the environmental impact, which we really don't know. But one of the reasons why Trump's concrete wall has been thrown to the wayside is because it doesn't make sense. It won't work. It would literally be pushed over by raging waters. You need you can't just have a concrete wall spanning thousands of miles and no way for the water to get out.
Did
And it
Trump forget that there's rivers in America and Mexico?
well, it's not only just the rivers, but if you have a downpour, the water is going to pull against these walls, and the force is going to actually demolish the wall, and that's why he turned to these metal slats. But on another note, it would greatly endanger wildlife. There's hundreds of species of birds and butterflies which live right along where this wall would be built, and we haven't done the proper studies to determine what kind of impact it would have on these species.
Do you really think Trump cares at all about the environment, though, Brian?
Is that a rhetorical question
No,
there?
I'm asking you, do you really think he cares? I mean, he's hiring climate change deniers to head up the EPA. He's allowing for elephant tusk to be brought back as trophies. It's like he doesn't care about that stuff. He just doesn't.
No, he doesn't. All he cares about is making himself look good, and he feels that the best way to do that is probably to boost the economy. And that's why he's deregulating everything, putting people's lives in jeopardy by deregulating. So what about some better ideas? Some ideas instead of building this idiotic wall.
Well, technology, I think technology is where the future lies. I think technology gets better every day. So I think we need to focus more on technology rather than a stagnant wall that can be climbed, tunneled under, whatever can be done around a wall. So there's drones, there's robots, there's sensors, there's cameras. I think they're all things that can be used.
Yeah, and I think you got to kind of integrate all this into a comprehensive system. You can use big data, you can use artificial intelligence, advanced communications technology. This isn't 1980. This is 2019, and the technology is just getting better and better. Building a wall now in 10 years, you're going to be like, why did we need this? I mean,
Wait, I'm like that right now.
we're like that right now, but even the Trump supporters and those for the wall, they're going to be like that too because it's just ridiculous, expensive, costly to repair. There's so many better technologies that are going to advance, and it's just foolish to build a wall.
Okay, I have an idea. How about Trump's been saying the wall has to be see-through, right? Why doesn't he just tell his base, I just built a 2,000-mile wall. It is completely see-through. You can see right through it. Can't even tell it's there.
That would probably work.
Don't you think?
Maybe we should propose it to him.
All right, go for it.
Should I tweet it to him right now? Invisible wall.
Go for it.
All right, I'm tweeting right now. Hold on.
Okay, so other ideas. We can concentrate on comprehensive immigration reform. Instead of building the wall or even doing anything physically, concentrate on policy.
Yeah, like I was saying before, the visa system's one of the issues. You gotta look at the bigger spectrum, the bigger picture here, not just the border and a stupid wall. You can fix DACA. You can tighten the visa system. You can tighten security at ports of entry and shipping ports.
Well, did you just see that big fentanyl bust? It was like Trump bragged about it, the largest fentanyl bust in American history coming over the border from Mexico. But you know where those drugs came? How they got through the country? They didn't come through an area where there's going to be a wall built.
In a cucumber truck.
In a cucumber truck. They came in a cucumber truck through a legal port of entry. The border security caught it though. I mean, they realized that packets of fentanyl don't really look that much like cucumbers after all.
I wonder if Trump's going to start a idea to ban cucumbers, and I wonder if that's going to include pickles as well.
I don't know. That's a good question, but I just see Trump as somebody who actually likes eating pickles.
How about flatbed trucks or big rigs? Maybe he should ban those too.
Well, the whole idea here is that there's ways to smuggle drugs, smuggle people, traffic people, human trafficking. There's ways to get people and drugs through at ports of entry. But luckily, our border security is they're good. They're trained to stop this stuff.
It was a dog that sniffed this out. And hey, why don't we just use some of this funding to train more dogs and more border security agents who can use these dogs to our advantage?
Well, at the same time, it would also create multiple new jobs that are permanent jobs, not temporary jobs like the ones that would be created to build a wall. These are permanent jobs. It would help employ more Americans. It would give people a sense of worth.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Another thing that Trump seems to be going the opposite direction on that could actually be a way to fight the chaos at the border while eliminating the need for a wall would be to raise the living standards of the nations who are coming here, Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, wherever people are coming here from. If we can help them, I think we can help the refugee problem.
That's the problem with Trump. He would never get his base to jump on that because remember what he said, America first. So in his base's mind, America first means just focus everything on America, build walls around America, and just care everything about America. But that you don't realize that we're in a globalized planet. We depend on other countries. Other countries depend on us.
This isn't like 1850 where there's no global economy and we're growing our own cotton and it's not, it's 2019.
Well, we
And
are still growing our own cotton, aren't we?
I'm guessing we grow a significant amount of cotton, but you get my point, Ed. Trump's doing the exact opposite though. He's trying to withdraw aid from Honduras and Guatemala, which are the very countries who these refugees are coming here from. So that's just going to create a worse refugee problem. And we're going to have more asylum seekers seeking asylum in the United States. It does the exact opposite. He's doing everything he can to make the problem worse so that his wall seems like a good idea.
Well, just like Gretchen said, the Border Patrol is actually dropping all of these asylum seekers off at bus depots to make it look like to the locals that they're being bombarded by these immigrants. So
Li-
it's all about creating this picture, creating this narrative to make people fearful. It's fear mongering.
Well, what does that tell you that they're doing that they're dropping these people off in bulk at bus stops? Like it basically says the United States government wants to make this situation look worse than it is because they realize that this situation really isn't a dire situation like the president's saying.
Exactly, exactly. And it's just all part of, like I said, Trump's fear mongering. It's the way he does things.
And Mexico, once again, is not paying a dime for it. Trump might say Mexico's paying for it because we signed this new trade deal, the USMCA. But anybody with an economics degree, any kind of background in business or finance, realizes that a trade deal has nothing to do with the finances of the country like this. For example, consider a trade deal like the USMCA, which may have put tariffs on certain goods that Mexico's exporting to the United States. Now, say you put a 30% tariff on avocados, right? So instead of $1, an avocado is now $1.30 for United States. For
And
us,
guacamole gets pretty expensive too.
guacamole would get probably 30% more expensive too. But now the Mexican merchant is still getting that dollar. But us as Americans are paying $1.30. So this is a tax on the American consumer. So why doesn't he just say the American consumer instead of the American taxpayer is paying for the wall? Because that's exactly what it would be in this case if the USMCA actually was making Mexico pay for it, which clearly is not.
So the wall, it's not a good idea. And I mean, even Trump's realizing he's not getting a wall. That's why he's diverting his attention now to focus on fencing, additional fencing, but he's still calling it a wall.
Yeah, and I don't see there being another government shutdown. I think that he's probably going to declare a national emergency and it's going to go to the courts, and I think eventually he'll lose. But I think maybe now it's time for our next segment.
Trump tweets.
So what are Trump tweets? They're pretty much what they sound like. Each week, Trump makes tweets, and each week we will respond to them on this podcast, just like we do on Twitter.
So this week, the intelligence community came forward and opposed the president on a few of his international positions. This included Iran and him saying that Iran was a major threat, as well as Trump claiming that North Korea is going to denuclearize. So after the intel community came forward and opposed him, he was livid. He did what he usually does. He turned to Twitter, probably while he is on the toilet, and this is what he tweeted, quote unquote. The intelligence people seem to be extremely passive and naive when it comes to the dangers of Iran. They are wrong. When I became president, Iran was making trouble all over the Middle East and beyond.
Sounds like he's about to bust out in a Will Smith rap or something.
Yeah, right. Let me continue. His tweet continued. Since ending the terrible Iran deal, they are much different, but a source of potential danger and conflict. They are testing rockets last week and more, and are coming very close to the edge. Their economy, he spelled there THERE, is now crashing, which is the only thing holding them back. Be careful of Iran. Perhaps intelligence should go back to school.
I have a lesson for you, Donald Trump. If you're going to tell your smartest intel officials to go back to school, you better be sure to make sure you triple check your grammar. I mean, come on.
It's just so crazy that he tells people that they're stupid, and in the sentence before he literally doesn't know the difference between there and there.
Well, the thing is, these intel chiefs that he's saying should go back to school are individuals who he appointed. Remember when he said, I only hire the best people? So, which is it, Donald Trump? Did you hire the best people or did you hire people who need to go back to school? You can't have it both ways.
Well, maybe he can. Maybe he considers people who need to go back to school as being the best people because then he can walk all over them.
Wait, I think that would explain Betsy DeVos.
Well, it also explains John Gartner's interview last week where he said that one of the main philosophies of these leaders that have these narcissistic personalities are that they want people who will bend at the knee and do whatever they say.
Yeah, for those who don't have any clue what Brian was talking about there, last week we interviewed a psychologist named John Gardner who basically said that Trump has the mental state that Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini and Saddam Hussein had, and that he is in pre-dementia and that he has 4 different mental disorders. So you should go back and listen to that episode.
All right, let's move on to the next tweet, Ed.
Next tweet. Democrats are becoming the party of late term abortion, high taxes, open borders, and crime.
This just had me so angry when I saw this. It's like, have you ever heard a Democrat say, hey, I want open borders and crime, and I'm all for late term abortion?
Well, the thing is, if you're going to say that Democrats are all for open borders, then how do you explain the proposals that Nancy Pelosi just put forth, basically trying to secure our borders?
Well, here's what aggravates me because Democrats are for late term abortions, but not the late term abortions that Trump's trying to portray. And that's abortions of women who have their lives in danger or where the fetus is mentally
They have abnormalities.
mentally abnormal or other abnormalities in the fetus. And first, to make a point, only about 1.4% of American women who have abortions do so after the 20th week. Now, also, a late term abortion is defined after the 27th week, so it's even fewer. It's probably under 1% of all abortions happen late term.
Well, I just read a study recently. I forget who wrote it, but it showed that actually these post 20-week abortions, the vast majority of them are happening because these women were unable to get abortions prior to 20 weeks because of inability to get health care, issues with testing. They just don't have that opportunity, so they're forced to wait until after 20 weeks.
Yeah, so these late term abortions, which happen after 27 weeks and are under 1% of all abortions, are happening. Almost all these abortions are happening because the woman's life is in danger or the fetus has some kind of abnormality. And to think that these old white men want to tell these women, no, you can't abort your baby to save your life or abort your baby because the fetal abnormalities are so great that the baby probably won't live very long, and if he or she does, it's going to be a burden on you for the rest of your life, and we're probably not going to take care of you via health care. It just aggravates me.
Yeah, well, what a lot of these quote unquote white men don't realize is that late term abortions are extremely painful and they're also very dangerous. So if a woman becomes pregnant and she doesn't want the baby, I know there's a lot of debate over this, but if she doesn't, do you really think She's going to go through her entire pregnancy where she's miserable, has morning sickness. Is she really going to put herself through that just so that she can have extra pain and face extra danger? It just doesn't make sense.
I know I'm going to take some heat for saying this from some people on the right, probably, but have you seen those pictures with Donald Trump Jr. holding up dead lions and tigers and cutting off elephant tails? I mean, he's killing these innocent creatures for sport, for fun, but at the same time, these same people like Donald Trump Jr. want to say, okay, women can't have a late term abortion if they're going to die. It just aggravates me. And I don't care if you're going to say, oh, well, they're animals. Well, they're doing it for fun. These women are doing it
To save their own lives.
save their lives. And I just don't have anything else to say about that.
All right, so why don't we move on to our next section entitled
Unhinged Attacks.
So unhinged attacks are where we take some of the attacks we get, usually on Twitter, sometimes via email, from the previous week, and we read them on air in order to decide whether they're true or whether they're totally unhinged.
Brian. We've had a lot of unhinged attacks this week, and I just really can't take it. I'm shaking like a crazy person. I'm sweating. I have sweat dripping down my back right now. I can't sleep at night. I have
Calm
night
down.
sweats. I just need to go to the doctor, I think.
Are you okay? You look like you're ready to pass out.
No, I'm perfectly fine. These unhinged attacks, they're just really getting to me.
Okay, so let's start with the first one.
All right, so the first unhinged attack was by somebody who I personally believe was a Russian troll, but I could be wrong. It read, "The Krasensteins are like someone microwaved the Property Brothers." Do you know who the Property Brothers are, Brian?
Yeah, my wife actually watches that show religiously.
They're pretty cool guys, right? I mean,
Yeah,
they're like my role models.
they are awesome. And for anybody to compare us to the Property Brothers and say that it's like somebody microwaved the Property Brothers, that's suggesting that we're hotter than the Property Brothers.
Or more radioactive than the Property Brothers.
So this means that we are more radioactive and hotter than the Property Brothers.
High five.
High five.
So now, why don't we move on to the next unhinged attack? This one comes in regards to a comment we made on episode 1 of Cast when we were speaking about the fact that we're 37 years old, but if you count the cuddling time in our mom's womb, we're actually 38 years old. And really, in reality, it's true. We spent 38 years together in our mother's womb.
I know. I think people are just jealous that they didn't spend an extra 9 months with their brother or sister.
I know, like so many people don't know what it's like to actually cuddle with somebody in a womb.
I know, and you think more people would kind of read up on womb cuddling, but apparently they don't.
I know, and it's just womb cuddling. Trust me, if you haven't ever done it, you won't ever do it.
All right, so let's get on with the tweet. The tweet read, "Actually, I did not expect them to go prenatal that quickly."
We didn't go prenatal too quickly, did we?
Well, first of all, why wouldn't they expect us to go prenatal? We're twins. I thought all twins go prenatal.
I think this person has a problem with people going prenatal.
I think they're anti-twin.
I think they're anti-prenatal.
I think they're anti-prenatal twin.
I think they're anti-prenatal twin podcast.
All right, well, I think that ends the unhinged attack section here. But if you want to attack us for womb cuddling, it doesn't bother us. Attack us all you want.
Womb cuddling is awesome. Well, I think that's a good way to end the show. Nothing like a good talk about womb cuddling. So this is the end of episode 3, but we would like you to encourage you guys to leave a review on iTunes. And also, this is very important, if you'd like to help support our show, you can back us on Patreon. You can get there by going to crassencast.com. At crassencast.com, you can become a backer. It starts at $1 and goes up to $39. If you back us at the $5 level, you get this podcast 2 days in advance. And you also get a bunch of additional content, from videos to outtakes to the ability to chat with Brian and I if you really want to do that, and a lot of other cool stuff. So we do appreciate it if you can back us.
We'll even talk to you in private about womb cuddling if you really want us to.
Yes, we are going to start a consultant firm about womb cuddling.
EMB
Womb
Womb
cuddling.
Cuddling. That's a wrap.